Hello, artists. Mrs. Williams here. Today we're going to read Dreamer from the Village. It's a book about painter Marc Chagall. Long ago on the plains of Russia, there was a village of dirt roads and timber houses. One day, while a fire raged through the town, a sickly baby was born. His mother kept him safe in a feeding trough. The baby was named Moshe, but later he was called Mark. As a little boy, he roamed the streets, clutching a hunk of buttered bread in his fist. Rabbis and schoolboys walked off to school, musicians and tradesmen trotted past, and women came out of shops, their baskets laden with cones of sugar and candles wrapped in blue papers. Sounds like a busy village. Mark climbed up to his attic window to get a better view. The town was like a richness that filled him. The goats, the chickens, the factories, the cemetery, and everything that lay beyond. Sometimes Mark even crawled up on the roof. After all, his grandpa used to do it. Mark heard that on Sukkot, or Simchas Torah, the old man could be seen perched on the chimney pipe, munching carrots, especially in nice autumn weather. The seasons brought wonderful holidays. On Passover, Mark loved the colorful pictures in the Haggadah. He loved the deep violet of the wine in his father's glass. And when he opened the door for the prophet Elijah, silver stars trembled on a velvety spring sky. Mark knew he was different from other boys. He saw things they didn't see. On the Sabbath, enchanted by the singing of prayers, Mark saw houses floating. Once, as his uncle fiddled him a tune, the ceiling opened. Mark saw the clouds in the evening sky, and he smelled the stable and the fields. And one afternoon, the color of his uncle's skin drifted out the window onto the street and rested on the kuppah of the church. Mark decided he was meant for something special. He didn't want a life like his father's. His papa rose at dawn to pray in temple, then spent the day hauling barrels of herring at a factory. At night, he came home with frozen hands, clothes wet with brine, too tired to eat his dinner. At school, Mark forgot his lessons an hour after he learned them. In high school, he failed all his subjects except drawing and geometry, the study of shapes. What was to become of him? The circles, lines, and angles seemed to take him somewhere. Using burlap bags for canvas, Mark began to draw. He hung his pictures on the wall for everyone to see, but his family didn't like them. And Uncle was afraid to shake his hand because making images was a sin. Once after the floor was washed, Mark's sisters took his sketches off the wall, laid them down, and wiped their shoes on them. Oh, that would make me sad. But Mark kept drawing. I'm so glad he didn't give up. One day, as his mother was making bread, he seized her floury elbow and he cried, "I want to be a painter. I can't be a clerk in a warehouse or an accountant or a butcher. Save me." His mother sent him to art school. The teacher told him to draw neat copies of plaster statues. The paint was the color of tobacco stains. But Mark wanted to draw villagers and peasants with loose, clumsy lines, with a touch of violet. That does not look like that. I like how Mark always used his imagination. Mark took more art lessons in St. Petersburg. He did not have the money for a room, so he shared beds with people. He slept on their couches or in cubbyholes under their stairs. He could only dream of bread and sausages. But when Mark painted, he was happy. Something always wanted to be painted. His village, the factories, his grandpa's house, even funerals that he'd watched. In one scene, the sad sky turned greenish yellow and a lonely fiddler crouched on the roof. I think Mark used a lot of color to express emotion. During a visit home, Mark met a woman named Bella. She was rich and wanted to be an actress. The two of them walked on a bridge, watching the clouds change shapes. They fell in love. Deep inside, Mark knew he was talented, but from teachers, he could learn nothing more. He's seen pictures from Paris, the art center of the world. Mark packed his paint box, his tubes of paint, everything he owned, and took the train to France. Paris was a thrill. In Russia, the sky was weak and dreary, but here the sun bathed everything in light. Mark rushed through the Louvre, that's a very famous, huge museum in Paris, to see the paintings. He spent hours at art galleries staring at the pictures. Some had bold colors and tilting shapes. They gave him ideas. Mark rushed to his studio. He painted till the sun came up on sheets, tablecloths, even nightshirts. Goats and milkmaids flew above his village. A jewel-green man talked to a see-through cow. A poet's head spun around as he wrote his poems, and the air shattered into window panes of color. This was not the way things really looked. It was how they made him feel. Years went by. Finally, a gallery invited Mark to have a one-man show. But Mark didn't want to stay in Paris. He missed Bella. Leaving his pictures at the gallery, he headed home to Russia. On his birthday, Bella came over. When he opened the door for her, he saw blue air, love, and flowers float in. 3 weeks later, they had a wedding. Happy couples soared through Mark's canvases. The village shone like an emerald. A great war broke out, keeping Mark and his bride in Russia. At first, he painted everything that passed by his window, the rabbis and the beggars and the sad old men. Some glowed red, others green, but soon he couldn't paint because he had to work to feed his family. One day, 8 years after he had left France, Mark received a letter from an old friend. "Are you still alive?" it said. "Do you know that you are famous here? Your paintings are selling for high prices." People smiled at Mark's magic animals. They sighed at the miracles of his village. His blooming colors filled their hearts with moods. No one had ever painted like this before. Mark moved back to France. He was finally able to earn a living doing what he always loved. He worked until he was an old man. When he was 90, Mark received a wonderful invitation. The Louvre wanted him to show his paintings. On opening day, Mark went to the museum. He had gone there long ago because his teachers didn't understand what he was doing. He'd been trying to paint the feelings that he carried in his heart ever since he was a little boy. For Mark, that was always the most important thing. It made him one of the greatest painters in the world. And there's one of his paintings there. And I love that story because I'm always telling you guys to paint what you feel. There's nothing right or wrong to paint. Paint what speaks to you. Well, I hope you enjoyed this book, Dreamer from the Village, and we will read again later. Bye, artists.